chasing me out of my bed. The beasts of my dreams are awake, hunting for me here instead. The breath of the beast on my neck, the buzz of the drone in the sky. Looking for love in the fog, looking for love in your eyes. I'd see enough to see that you're the one for me.
The weather is always a sure topic of conversation wherever you live. But if you live in Southeast, it's more than just something to talk about. It's a fact of daily life. Hello, I'm Scott Oster. Welcome to Rain Country, a program that takes its name from our weather, although in a more liquid form than we find today. But this is just an example of the variety that we have in our weather. A few facts. On the historic average, Juneau gets most of its snow in December and January, averaging about 23 inches in each month. The wettest month is October, 7 inches of rain. It's warmest in July, where the average temperature is 56 degrees. It's coldest in January, average temperature 23. There's also a surprising amount of variety in our weather in just the short 10-mile distance between downtown and the valley. Downtown is wetter, almost twice as much rain, but it's warmer. Only one day a year below freezing or below zero in downtown, and 10 days below zero out in the valley. And not surprisingly, there are 25 more growing days downtown than in the valley. Well, the point of all this is that some of us just talk about the weather and then go off to work. But others go off to the work just so they can talk about the weather.
Since weather affects us every day, it's all around you. It's one of the more interesting things, and one of the things that you get, it's going to impact everybody's life to some extent or another. You know, even if it's as little as what am I going to wear today? That's a weather phenomena that has impacted everybody. And so we do talk about weather a lot.
The 1 p.m. weather observations for southeast Alaska.
While everyone talks about the weather, for those who work at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Juneau, it's their day-to-day job. The forecast office is operated 24 hours, 7 days a week, and is constantly updating a variety of forecasts for the communities and waterways of southeast Alaska.
The foundation of all good forecasts is observations. Without good observations, the forecast cannot be good. We get observations from a number of sources. Surface observations come in from places not only in southeast Alaska, but from all over the state and actually all over the world. We have them from flight service people in Sitka and from Ketchikan and from Juneau here. And then we have certain people who are paid by the Weather Service. We call them A-paid observers. And they take a set number of observations every day. And we have a number of them in southeast Alaska. These are the stations like Haines and Skagway and Wrangell and Petersburg and places like that. Twice a day at about 0Z and 12Z, Greenwich Mean Time, which is about Juneau time, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock in the morning. There are stations all over the world that release balloons, and these contain a big weather balloon. It's got a package about that size that contains electronic equipment that will record and transmit back to their parent station the upper air. It gives you kind of a snapshot of the atmosphere as it goes up, and all of this data is then combined and put back into a central computer in Washington and for our processing use.
The observations and various data from weather balloons and satellites are fed to a computer in Washington, D.C. The information becomes part of many mathematical equations that predict where various pressure areas and weather fronts will be in 12, 24, 36, and 48 hours. Maps are drawn to show the computer's analysis.
Then it's up to us to determine what clouds are going to be formed by that frontal system or by that low pressure system, and what weather patterns, what weather features will come from that. A forecaster, through his experience, will see things developing maybe on a satellite, maybe driving to work in the morning. Forecasters are people. They look around in the morning when they're driving to work. They see whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy day. So they start to think about their job as they're driving in the morning. Actually, when they get up, they look outside and see whether it's nice out or not nice out. And so you start to think about things like that, and you start to feel a little bit. And if you work 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row and you've had this background of knowledge that you have worked with the last 2 or 3 days, you kind of get a feel for the weather, and you expect a certain thing when you come in your next shift. And you look at the weather patterns, you get a briefing from the person that you're relieving, and you start to think about, okay, this is what I saw yesterday, this is what I saw the day before, this is what I expected, and this is what's occurring, and this is what the guy told me just now is occurring and what he thinks, and this is what the model is telling me, and this is what I see on the satellite. And I bet you 5 years ago, I think I remember a case like this where this happened. See, all of this gets put together in the forecaster's brain as he is working this, and this is how he develops what he is going to actually type out on the KCRT, on our communication system, to put out as a forecast to the populace.
A variety of influences make forecasting for southeast Alaska challenging.
Time of the year makes a big difference. Summertime is our least accurate time because the weather systems are very, very weak, and they're very nebulous. And so trying to hit the summertime systems are very, very hard, because there's not something you really hang your hat onto. It's not a big, strong system coming through. It's comes in a weak little piddly crud thing that comes through, and we're going to miss those more often in the summertime than we will in the wintertime. In southeast Alaska, the mountains, the topography are one of the biggest, they are probably the single biggest reason for the divergence in weather around here, the differences in weather. They are the biggest cause of precipitation around here. You get the air hits the mountains, goes up, it cools off, and it precipitates. That's one of the big mechanisms for causing precipitation.
And that precipitation can vary dramatically in just a few miles. For example, the driest location in the Juneau area is the airport, the official recording station for the community. Less than 60 inches of rain is recorded there in an average year. 10 miles away in West Juneau, the precipitation doubles to just over 120 inches a year. And across the channel in downtown Juneau, the rainfall level drops 20 inches to average about 100 inches a year. These changes over a small area illustrate another difficulty in predicting southeast weather.
We try to get what the predominant condition is going to be over these broad areas, and hope that the people who live in these areas and who are going to be in these areas will recognize the individual quirks, if you will, of those locations. For example, we have a forecast for Icy Strait. Icy Strait's a big area, and it's quite wide open. So you get a southeasterly wind in there of maybe 20 knots. I have talked to a fellow that lives over on the south side of Lemishire Island, and he knows that when we put out a southeast wind 20, it's probably going to be southeast to 30 at his area. Why? Because he's at an area where Lemishire Island and the north portion of the island south of his constrict. And so the winds are going to be a little stronger in there. And so he knows this. And so he has used our forecast. Even though our forecast may not be exact for his area, he knows what it's like in his area, and so he gets a picture of the weather, and he can plan based on that, and it's fairly consistent. And the same thing has got to be true in other areas around the state as well.
Learning how to modify a forecast for a general area to a specific location is a good start in adapting to southeast weather. And adapting is about all one can do when it comes to the weather.
As far as changing it, we can't do very much at all. Nothing. We can try to alert people when severe weather is coming. We can try to tell people when a change is coming. And I think we hit the big changes pretty well. We missed some of the little ones, but we want to tell people what we think the weather is going to be so that people can use that information to prepare. As Leif, our boss, says, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I guess that's what we try to do. We try to give people a bit of information so they can be prepared and are not caught unaware if something bad happens.
Well, gold was found in Austin town in 1898, and the miners came to stake a claim for fortune or for fame. With a pick and pan for every man, a blanket for the cold, like a winding chain they came and came to look for yellow gold. Well, this was the Yukon, it was wild, it was free, where gold and the Klondike made Yukon history. When the northern wind is blowing, ho, ho, listen and you'll hear the echo of the Yukon from the days of yesteryear. While the men were up and the women tough, some lived a life of sin. Some gave their soul for an ounce of gold or a drink of whiskey gin. And the dance hall girls, the long black curls, stood by the door so bold. They waved their thumbs and miners come and bring your poke of gold. Well, this was the Yukon, it was wild, it was free, where gold and the Klondike made Yukon history. When the northern wind is a-blowing, ho, ho, listen and you'll hear the Jocko. There was Windy Ike and a one-eyed Mike and a cotton fingers Joe. There was Sam McGee from Tennessee and a man called Ace High Dan. There was Muckluck Mag and a hairless Dag and a Dawson Queenie Ann. Well, this was the Yukon, it was wild, it was free, where gold and the Klondike made Yukon history. When the northern wind is a-blowing, oh, listen and you'll hear the echo of the Yukon from the days of yesteryear. Then came the days so dark and gray and the Dawson lights were dim, and the only sound from the hills around was the wail of the northern wind. Old Dawson town has settled down, the gold rush days are gone, and the days of old are stories told where the memories linger on. Well, this was the Yukon, it was wild, it was free, where gold and the Klondike made Yukon history. When the northern wind is a-blowing, oh, listen and you'll hear the echo of the Yukon from the days of yesteryear.
When first unto this country a stranger I came, pick and shovel on my back, no money to my name, no money to my name. I landed in old Juneau, Seattle down the line, boat across the channel where we worked the Treadwell Mine, worked the Treadwell Mine. Now it's hard times in the open pit, 1,800 down. One day you'd make $2 and the next you're glory bound, the next you're glory bound. Now I dodged the rocks from the sudden slides, swam out of the flood. In the rain and cold we dug for gold through the water and the mud, the water and the mud. There's color in the eagle's eye and the sun at the break of day, but there ain't no color I could find to keep me on that pay, to keep me on that pay. So a straight way through the wilderness to Fairbanks up the line, and down the frozen Yukon in the year of 99, the year of 99. Now there's 20,000 of us here out on the beach at Nome, but there ain't but 1 in 50 who can pay his way back home, pay his way back home. God find the snowblind trapper and help him on his way. God bless the drunken fiddler when he finds the time to play, and hear the words of the dying man left frozen in the cold, and pity the weary miner who will never find his gold, never find his gold. Now I wish I was in Portland or some other seacoast town. I'd sail around this whole wide world and lay this cradle down, lay this cradle down. What is that light on the far horizon, reflecting in your eyes? It is
From out of the Yukon country, over the White Pass Trail, you see the green and yellow are riding their crooked rail. They're screaming down through Utah, past Carcross and the lake, and maybe they'll make Bennett if the engineer's awake. And then they leave Lake Bennett, and it's U.S. all the way. Past Fraser and at Glacier, they're looking at Lynn Bay. But they don't see the derail that's blocking up the line. And just 'cause cars are on the ground, it's only overtime. Old 101 by Clifton, just listen to that sound. Then they dump the air in Skagway, 'cause the whole thing's on the ground. Well, number 2's a little late, which means she's right on time. And if the cars stay on the rail, she might be in by 9. Old Hissman's in a motor car that Hammy just BO'd, 'cause the windshield wiper's leaving streaks and he can't see down the road. Well, the baggage boys are loading freight, which makes the union frown. But the company says we got good men, it's hard to keep 'em down. Well, now you've heard my story about the old White Pass. They're hauling freight and passengers and wasting lots of gas. My story has no moral and certainly no rhyme, but quite unlike the White Pass route, it's ending right on time.
Now we've arrived at the Mexican mine. Both the mill site and the mine, the shafts are on the uphill side of the trail here. This is the Mexican mine. This is the main shaft for the Mexican mine is right here. The owners of the Mexican consolidated with John Treadwell in 1891. And that year they started digging a tunnel here, right behind us. They dug a tunnel straight into the bank. And they took out about 450 tons of ore that year, and they took it to Treadwell's mills for testing. The results of the testing of that ore were so encouraging that they built a 60 stamp mill off to the left here by December of 1893. Their ore was coming from their tunnel behind us here. They had found another rich body of ore like they did at Treadwell, and they were mining underneath of it, and they created a smaller version of the glory hole up behind us. In August of 1894, they started to dig what became their main shaft under where I'm standing. By the end of that year, the shaft was down 130 feet, and they'd taken out about 74,000 tons of ore. They also built the head frame above this shaft. We're now on the inside of the stamp mill at the Mexican mine. As you can see, they used a redwood foundation here also. This mine was doing quite well, and they doubled this in size to a 120 stamp mill in 1896. The vanna room was on the beach side of the stamp mill. Here at the Mexican, you get to see what the vanna rollers look like. Here's a whole pile of vanna rollers here. This is the rollers that carried the in this belt that I talked about, that revolved and vibrated to process the gold after it went through the stamp mill. Accidents were all too common here when the mine was in operation. There were countless injuries here, and about 200 fatalities during the lifetime of the Treadwell mine. Of course, that was considered a pretty good record in those days. The worst accident to occur as far as loss of life is concerned during the entire history of the Treadwell mine occurred 1,100 feet below where I'm sitting. was on March the 3rd of 1910 at 11:25 p.m. The cage had gone down to the 1,300-foot level and brought the men up for their evening meal. At the 1,100-foot level, there were 39 men waiting for the cage for their turn to come up when a devastating blast occurred. 38 of them were killed. One man was killed waiting by the shaft at the 990 level. So there were 39 fatalities that evening. The explosives that they used in those days were quite unstable, and they were careful about not storing too much of it around, certainly where the people lived or worked. But they needed some on the job for the daily use. So they stored it right next to the vertical shaft. Their thought was, if there was an accidental blast, the force of the blast would be wasted up the shaft or down the shaft, and not into the tunnels where the men would be working. Unfortunately, on that day, all of the men were standing in harm's way. Well, behind me is the hoist for the Mexican mill. The rollers are still in place here. This, of course, was covered with a structure, and the cable went off the rollers to the head frame, which was right over this direction. This is a side view of the Mexican hoist. Pretty much intact. Here you see where the operator stood to bring the ore and men up out of the mine. The control levers are still in place. In 1899, the Mexican mine and the Ready Bullion mine went together and constructed a 400-man bunkhouse on these pilings. And just beyond us here, on the beach toward the Ready Bullion mine, were two apartment buildings. And up in the trees beyond that was a cluster of single-family homes. There was quite a stretch of boardwalk between the Mexican mine and the Ready Bullion mine where we are now. The boardwalk came along the beach, and next to the boardwalk was the rail line which connected all the mines. This is an overall view of the Ready Bullion mine. The head frame is on the left. The mill is on the right. We're now inside the Ready Bullion stamp mill. This was built in 1898 and started operating late that same year. In 1915, they added 30 more stamps here. You can tell the stamp mill by their distinctive concrete foundation that supported the stamps. The vanner room is on the beach side of the stamp mill. Here you see the water line coming into the Ready Bullion mill here. You see the valve that's still in place that controlled the flow of the water into the mill. It was this 17-foot Pelton wheel that drove the Ready Bullion mill. I'm standing on what was once one of the main shafts here at the Ready Bullion mine. This entire area, including the concrete structure behind me, was covered by the head frame. The crusher here at the Ready Bullion was mounted above this concrete structure, which is really a storage bin for the ore. The rail cars came through here and were loaded through the chute behind me, and the ore was taken to the mill. It was because most of the mining here at the Ready Bullion is under Gastineau Channel. The mine management began to fear that it may cave in and flood all the mines because they were connected. So in 1913, they installed a 36-foot concrete plug in the connecting shaft between here and the Mexican mine. In 1914, carbide lamps, headlamps, replaced candles while the men working in the mine. The Ready Bullion was the last mine to make that transition. Prior then, each man was given a handful of candles when they went to work. These men were working by candlelight at the 1,500-foot level. In 1907, they started to test and construct a cyanide plant. They wanted to be able to process all the concentrates themselves. By 1910, that plant was constructed, and they stopped shipping the concentrates to Tacoma. So once again, they were producing all their own gold here on the mine property. Each morning, mine cars filled with concentrates from the 4 vanner mills would arrive here, and the cars were winched up the steep tracks behind me to the cyanide plant. The concrete structure behind me is the refinery. The cyanide plant consisted of two huge wooden structures to the side and above the refinery. The winch that pulled the cars up to the cyanide plant is in this building. Inside the building, you can see where the operator made it up the steps to his platform, where he could operate the winch by looking out of the window in front of him. This is how cyanide was shipped to the facility here in these containers. You see on this one, you can still see remains of Treadwell, Alaska. This is the last of a great relic here at the Treadwell. This is a tube mill, which is really like a giant tumbler. They put the concentrates into the mill, into this opening that you see there, and they added Danish flint. Flint is very hard, so it was able to crush the ore, pulverize the ore actually, as it was tumbled around and around and around. We're now inside the refinery. This is where they made the gold bars, so not everyone got to come into this building. This was a secure area. You'll note the bars on the windows, and this is a vault where they stored the gold bars. The gold was weighed on this set of scales. The vault is on the right. This worker removed the hot gold bars from the molds. Note the heavy gloves he is wearing. These were the last gold bars made here at Treadwell. The value of $215,558.31 is written on the photograph. They had the first annual New Year's Eve ball for the cyanide plant, which included the refinery, in 1910. Some of the dances they did that night were the Golden Waltz, the Tube Mill Two-Step, and the Ready Bullion Polka. The process of separating the gold from the ore was fairly long and involved. Well, attached to the program that night in 1910 for their New Year's Eve ball was a series of drawings and prose done by those who worked here, explaining the entire process. So I'm going to let the miners who worked here tell you how they did it.
The rock is blasted with giant powder and broken with hammers deep in the hills, whence, hoisted by buckets to the surface, 'tis trammed in cars to the various mills. The rock, then crushed to 3-inch size, is passed to the stamps to pulverize. These stamps, 1,000 pounds in weight, splash out the rock to the amalgam plate. From the plate to the vanner, the sands then drop, which separates the values with its vibrating top. Then the sands of small value are taken in haste to the big filter presses to be run to waste. Up the long track the concentrates go. Then, weighed, they are fed to the tubes below. To 200 mesh are the concentrates ground, as the tube filled with pebbles goes round and round. To the classifier then this fine product goes, where the coarse is raked back and the fine overflows. This overflow goes into the pachucas to a cyanide solution protected with lime. Thrice agitated by air and decanted as well, the gold is dissolved in 2 days' time. Into the gold solution comes a replacing zinc, which throws down gold precipitate, black as ink. The precipitate, fluxed with litharge, is fed to the blast furnace, where the gold melts with the lead. The lead bullion then into the reverbatory is cast, where the lead coupled off leaves gold bullion at last. So by boat to the mint goes the gold bullion then, whence, stamped into coin, it comes back to the mint.
Early on, there was a small foundry at the Treadwell Mine. In 1909, they built a new facility here at this location, which is the point of land which sticks out in front of the Mexican mine. It cost $20,000 for this facility, and they had an extensive set of sand molds which they could cast parts with their heavy machinery. This facility was operational up until about 1944. And they built parts for not only the mining industry, but for other industries as well. Now that we have walked through all the mines, let's look at the entire Treadwell complex as it appeared in its prime. This is the 300 mill, the superintendent's house, the store and office, the glory hole, the 240 mill, Treadwell Heights, the bunkhouses, the Treadwell Club, the nanatorium, which was the site of the pending disaster, the combination shaft, the 700 mill, the Mexican mill and head frame, the refinery where the gold bars were made, the cyanide plant, the foundry, the 400-man bunkhouse, which was shared by the Mexican and Ready Bullion mines, the 2 apartment houses, a cluster of small homes for the married workers at the Ready Bullion mine, the Ready Bullion mill, and the Ready Bullion head frame. Over the years, there was lots of caving going on down in the mines, and the shafts that were no longer used. And occasionally, minor cracks would show up on the surface. By 1916, it was obvious that there was some major shifting going on, and major cracks began to show up on the surface. Some of the equipment was knocked out of alignment because of the shifting of the ground. The ground around the Treadwell Club and the nanatorium was sinking. Also in 1916, production dropped significantly at the Treadwell Mine and at the Mexican mine because they were getting a lower quality of ore. The 240 stamp mill was closed down, and half of the 300 stamp mill was shut down. Production was also down at the 700-foot mine. On the positive side, production was up at the Ready Bullion mine, and there they were hiring more men to work underground. In 1917, the ground really started to move here. On April 20th, the pool in the nanatorium dropped 5 feet, and the building started to collapse. There was some major caving going on in the mine. The nanatorium once stood right behind where I'm standing, where there's now just water. It was on the evening of April 21st, 1917, and water was seen seeping into the ground behind the nanatorium. It started as a trickle, and then the tide began to come in, and it turned into a torrent. The ground was opening up and being washed away. The mines were being filled with salt water. At 11:15 p.m. that night, the alarm was sent out, evacuate the mines. Within an hour and a half, all 350 men that were underground that night were safely out of the mine. The superintendent and 3 others risked their lives by going back down into the mines to make sure everyone was out and to try and desperately determine what was happening and what the damage was. They were lucky to make it out alive, only because there was a skillful operator running the hoist that night that they made it. By 2:30 a.m. on April 22nd, the Treadwell mine was flooded, and the glory hole became the lake that it is today. The horses and mules that were in the mine did not make it out. Within a matter of hours, the glory days of the Treadwell mine were over. The concrete plug that had been installed to save the mines from a possible collapse of the Ready Bullion mine actually saved the Ready Bullion mine. It operated until December 18th, 1922. After that, the sounds of the stamp mills were never to be heard again on Douglas Island. At its peak, there were 960 stamps here, crushing the ore, capable of crushing 5,000 tons per day. And during the years of 1885 to 1922, they crushed 28 million tons of ore. And from that, they recovered 3,227,986 ounces of gold. And that had a value of $66,946,198. And that was in days when gold sold for $20.67 an ounce. So the mines here at the Treadwell complex produced gold with a value of more than 9 times the $7.2 million the United States had paid for Alaska in 1867. So, whatever happened to John Treadwell? We had a brother named James who started a trust company. John invested all of his money in that company, and they lost it all. He went broke. He filed for bankruptcy in New York in 1914. Had about $3 million in debts and no assets. John Treadwell died in New York on November 6, 1927, at the age of 85. Well, now we've seen the Treadwell Mine from its beginning to its end. And that concludes our tour here. Hope to see you again on the next one.
of our mass destruction, and now it counts for something. I never had a fault and I always stay strong. Listen to the wise and I know I mean no wrong, no wrong.
These are my days, just living my life.
Whether wrong or right. These are my days, just living our life. Whether wrong or right.
These are my days, just living my life.
Whether wrong or right. These are my days, just living our life.
In the eyes of the wicked, something that they will see only misery makes a tragedy. But to me, the lust born upon a world of sin and places not forgiven, where the good die young. It's a sad thing, not a bad thing. And those who don't understand turn away and ran, I'll be damned. Running from the problems, call them the coward. We have issues which we stick through. Coming face to face, dance with the devil, don't run. It's a